Speaking of those people who are already leaning into dependence on the government and thinking the government owes them everything, New York City is now being governed by a democratic socialist who seems to be really leaning in on the socialism in a way that's shocking to many of us. It's just shocking that we would elect somebody like that as the mayor of New York. And it was very interesting to see over this past week, because not yesterday, but a week earlier, there was a big snowstorm that hit the Northeast, hit most of the country, including the Northeast.
It was supposed to be a smooth, confident media moment, but it turned into the clip social media just could not stop playing. Zohran Mamdani walked in polished and composed, ready to take on whatever came his way. Then Megyn Kelly dropped one detail that completely shifted the energy in that room. The change was subtle, but brutal. Was it a calculated trap, or was it a costly mistake on his part? Either way, what happened next has everyone talking, and definitely not for the reasons he wanted.
We got to start with Mamdani, and this guy who's closely linked with radical Islamists like this imam who testified for the blind sheikh who bombed the World Trade Center in 1993. Mamdani with his arms literally around that guy, calling him a pillar of the community, about to, as of the vote today, we believe, become the mayor of New York City. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's a disgrace. I think it's a shame.
If you're enjoying this, please subscribe to the channel. It genuinely helps more than you know. He came in ready for a debate, but what he never saw coming was a full-blown audit. For months, Zohran Mamdani has carefully built his reputation as one of the most fearless progressive voices in New York politics.
Listen to this terrifying bit of predictions by him. SOT 5.
An agenda that will freeze the rents for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants. Make buses fast and free. And deliver universal child care across our city.
Good luck.
We will hire thousands more teachers.
He speaks with confidence about housing reform, economic justice, and corporate accountability, consistently positioning himself as the bold challenger to deeply entrenched power. His supporters see him as sharp, articulate, and unshakably principled. His critics, though, they see something else entirely.
Mamdani seems poised easily to win this mayoral race, which is depressing because he gives answers like this when asked very straightforward questions on Fox News by the very talented Martha McCallum. SOT 4.
If you are asked tomorrow night if you give credit to President Trump for the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and the return of the 20 living hostages, would you raise your hand?
When it comes to the ceasefire, I am thankful and I have hope that it will actually endure and that it will be lasting.
They see ambition hiding behind slogans. They see confidence that regularly sprints past clarity, and during a recent high-profile face-off with Megyn Kelly, those two very different versions of the same man collided in a way that neither side could brush off or ignore.
It's going to happen. I mean, the latest poll from Atlas Intel showed Cuomo within 4, but that poll received some criticism for having too much, it heavily weighted Republicans and independents, which of course are not the dominant voting bloc in New York. And it's amazing to me that this city, this great city, I mean, honestly, it's America's crown jewel. It's the greatest city in the world, in my opinion, bar none, is about to be taken over by this, yes, communist, potentially radical Islamist. I mean, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, Matt.
The conversation kicked off the way these political showdowns always do. Familiar talk about inequality, systemic reform, and what Mamdani calls structural failures in American governance. He leaned into his message with practiced ease, laying out policy proposals and framing his movement as a direct response to corporate influence in politics. On the surface, it looked like yet another predictable clash between ideological opposites. Viewers expected sharp disagreements and rehearsed counterattacks. What unfolded instead was something far more revealing. Megyn Kelly did not come in swinging with a shouting match or theatrical confrontation. Her strategy was something far more dangerous. Methodical precision. Rather than attacking Mamdani's ideology in broad strokes, she zeroed in on specifics. She raised fiscal projections that critics argue dangerously underestimate long-term costs. She questioned whether certain proposals, however emotionally powerful, had ever been seriously stress-tested against against real-world economic conditions. The exchange never exploded into chaos. Instead, it tightened like a vice. Mamdani attempted to pivot back to principle, emphasizing the moral urgency of reform and the human cost of doing nothing. Kelly, however, never flinched, keeping her laser focus on numbers and feasibility. She framed every question around practicality rather than ideology, pressing hard on how these programs would avoid the same pitfalls that have destroyed similar initiatives elsewhere.
About 1.5 to 2 feet of snow around here. And I lived in New York for 14 years. It takes a while to dig out of the storm. It doesn't take 8 days. And this was just a taste of what people were seeing. It was not only cars completely snowed in, but it was garbage everywhere. The sanitation's not going well. He's not doing a very good job of running such a large city. And here is actor Michael Rapaport showing some.
It was a sharp pivot from philosophy to execution, and it demanded a completely different kind of answer. As the conversation pushed forward, viewers began noticing a change in Mamdani's rhythm. His responses grew more measured, occasionally circling back to broader themes whenever the conversation got too specific. He kept returning to the importance of vision while defending what he called the flexibility of his policy framework. Kelly countered sharply, suggesting that flexibility without clearly defined guardrails creates dangerous instability, especially in urban governance where budgets are already bleeding. What made the moment so gripping was not any single statement, but the slow, suffocating buildup of tension. Kelly presented evidence suggesting that some of Mamdani's claims about funding sources were far more optimistic than current revenue streams could realistically support. She cited independent analyses pointing to potential tax burdens that could stretch well beyond the wealthy individuals constantly named in campaign speeches. She pressed hard on whether New York's economic ecosystem could actually absorb the level of transformation Mamdani was envisioning, without gutting small businesses and wiping out local employment. The conversation reached its most explosive pressure point when Kelly referenced earlier remarks in which Mamdani appeared to downplay certain trade-offs tied to his agenda. She held those remarks directly against current indicators, on suggesting the margin for experimentation was far narrower than he had ever publicly admitted. The implication was impossible to miss. Bold rhetoric demands equally bold accountability.
Night, the anger that he spewed, I mean, he dropped the mask immediately. Mamdani did. Immediately. He got up there and was all but rubbing his hands together, looking at his new power and what he's going to do to the city of New York. God bless them. I wish them all the luck. And I'm worried on a personal basis because we go to New York, of course. If you live anywhere near New York City, you go for shows, you go for occasional dinners. You know, your kids go. I shudder to think of what he's going to do to it.
Kelly's questioning crystallized that tension perfectly, focusing less on whether change is desirable and more on whether change could survive contact with reality. Throughout the rest of the exchange, Mamdani kept hammering the moral imperative behind his platform. He argued that incrementalism has failed to address housing shortages and widening inequality. He insisted that transformative policy requires courage and that fear of disruption should never paralyze meaningful reform. Kelly fired back, asserting that transformation without clearly articulated safeguards can produce serious unintended harm, especially in cities already suffocating under fiscal pressure. The debate ultimately exposed two completely contrasting philosophies about governance. Mamdani frames politics as a vehicle for an ambitious reimagining of social structures. Kelly frames politics as an arena where ambition must survive contact with economic constraints and historical precedent. The truth likely sits somewhere between those two positions, as political platforms often evolve dramatically under pressure. What cannot be ignored is how rapidly the narrative flipped. An interview expected to be yet another ideological sparring match became a masterclass in the power of focused, relentless questioning. Kelly did not rely on volume or spectacle. She relied on documentation and repetition.
How's he going to make buses faster? Like, well, where does he get that power?
I know the answer to this. Do you want to know what the theory is? The theory is that by people not having to put money in, that will make it faster and easier for the buses to run. That you eliminate that
I'm
step.
happy to hear you say that, Andy. I thought they were going to run over pedestrians. This is better. Your plan.
They already do that. Have you ever stood on a corner in New York when the bus is going by? There's not even half an inch between the bus, its wheels, and you.
She returned to feasibility again and again, inviting viewers to look past the message and examine the actual mechanics behind it. For Mamdani, this moment serves as both a serious challenge and a genuine opportunity. Public scrutiny can sharpen proposals and force assumptions into the open. If his agenda holds up under sustained examination, it could emerge stronger, more detailed, and more credible. If weaknesses persist, they will demand serious revision before voters hand over large-scale authority. The exchange also shines a sharp light on the evolving power of media figures in shaping political accountability. When interviews push past rehearsed talking points and into hard technical analysis, they force candidates to prove mastery beyond slogans. That shift dramatically raises the stakes for anyone seeking public office in an era defined by instant fact-checking and relentless replay. In the days following the exchange, commentators dissected the footage frame by frame. Clips spread across platforms, not because of theatrics, but because it captured something rare. A moment where precision completely overtook performance. Ultimately, the lasting impact will depend entirely on what happens next. Will Mamdani refine his proposals with hard data and transparent projections? This moment will stand as a reminder that in modern politics, conviction must coexist with calculation. The silence that captured everyone's attention was never about defeat. It was about recalibration. It was the moment bold ideas came face to face with the demand for equally bold precision.
Last night was a total and complete disaster. I realized these were blue states. I don't care. The margins are so large, and Republicans lost across the board, everywhere, in every race. There's really no good news. Literally, the only good news is how radical the Democrats are and how Mamdani will now be the poster child for every Republican to use against his opponent. I mean, they'll all have to explain where they stand on Mamdani as he wrecks.
Whether that realization strengthens or derails Mamdani's political trajectory remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the conversation has changed, and so has the scrutiny around him. The next chapter will not be written by headlines alone. It will be written in the details. In the aftermath of the exchange, the broader political landscape began reacting in predictable yet deeply revealing ways. Progressive allies framed the moment as proof that Mamdani is being taken seriously enough to face intense examination from high-profile commentators. They argued that rigorous questioning signals relevance rather than weakness, and that any candidate proposing structural change should expect sustained pressure from those with everything to lose under the current system. From their perspective, the scrutiny only confirmed how genuinely disruptive his platform could be. At the same time, moderate Democrats and independent voters appeared less focused on ideological alignment and far more concerned with managerial readiness. Political strategists watching the moment noted that confidence in debate settings almost always hinges on anticipating the most uncomfortable questions before they ever get asked. While Mamdani clearly demonstrated fluency in articulating the values behind his agenda, the interview strongly suggested that opponents will increasingly bypass philosophical terrain entirely, targeting implementation metrics instead. In modern campaigns, white papers and fiscal projections carry just as much weight as the loudest rally speeches.
We didn't even talk, we spent so much time on the socialism and his radical Islamist ties. We didn't even really spend a lot of time on the fact that he's budgeting, he said, $65 million to trans anyone who wants it, from in-state or out-of-state, minor or adult, on the taxpayer dime. He basically wants New York to be a sanctuary for trans children. Last night, his speech, he thanked every foreign nation.
Voters who once leaned primarily on party loyalty now cross-reference political claims against independent analyses available in real time. This shift reflects a much deeper transformation in political communication. Audiences are no longer passive recipients of campaign messaging. They are active, engaged participants in verification. When Kelly introduced specific economic data and prior statements directly into the conversation, she effectively mirrored the research habits of a digitally empowered electorate. The moment felt less like a traditional media ambush and far more like a live audit, conducted on behalf of viewers who demand real transparency. The episode also reignited fierce debate over the role of ideological media platforms in shaping public perception. Some analysts argued that Kelly's skepticism reflects a broader conservative critique of progressive governance. Others insisted her questions would have been equally relevant regardless of partisan alignment. What remains undeniably clear is that interviews structured around policy rather than personality generate an entirely different kind of political test. They move past narrative framing and straight into operational feasibility, and that is exactly where campaigns either prove their substance or fall apart.
Obviously celebrating after Donald Trump's victory as well, we should have, and it was a huge victory, and I think without Trump winning, we'd be in a much worse spot today. But it certainly shows that the fight is not over, that there was a lot of talk, I think, among conservatives, and maybe I even used the phrase of like the golden age. We're entering the golden age. And it's it's okay to be happy and celebrate, and sometimes you take it a little too far and you say things like that.
That's the reason why it was all young people.
Mm-hmm.
Young Nimrods who actually think, gee, this is a new idea. We should try it. No one's ever tried this before. How could socialism work? Maybe that's the answer to all of our problems. We'll be the very first. And by the way, we have absolutely no terrorism risk because there's been no meaningful terror attack that I can remember in my lifetime. I mean, this is like who's controlling these elections. Canadian Debbie really wants me to play the following soundbite for you.
As campaign season accelerates, opponents are almost certain to revisit the exchange in advertisements and debates. Conversely, Mamdani's team may highlight moments showcasing his composure under pressure as evidence of steadiness and resilience. In contemporary politics, moments are rarely static. They are edited, reframed, and redistributed to serve competing storylines. The deeper implication of the exchange lies in what it signals about voter expectations. There is a growing and undeniable impatience with vague fiscal commitments and fuzzy administrative logistics. Citizens navigating rising living costs and mounting urban policy challenges want reassurance that transformative visions are anchored in durable, real frameworks, not just inspiring language. On whether Mamdani's campaign responds with expanded detail or reframed messaging will determine how this moment is ultimately remembered. The exchange did not produce a definitive verdict, but the scrutiny may yet strengthen his trajectory. If vulnerabilities persist without clarification, opponents will keep probing them without mercy. In a media environment completely saturated with spectacle, this conversation stood out precisely because it refused to play that game. It proved that the most consequential political moments often arise not from outrage, but from inquiry. And as voters weigh the future of their city and their representation, inquiry may ultimately prove far more powerful than applause.